Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It all started in a way that was almost imperceptible. Small changes, gestures that would have gone unnoticed before, but over time they gained weight. Madison still had the same smile, the same sweet words, the same scheduled hugs. But something had changed, and Logan felt it like an invisible presence between them. It was the kind of thing no one can quite explain, only feel. And Logan, as much as he wanted to believe it was just stress or adjusting to the new job, started paying closer attention. Not with desperation. With method. With patience. She had been hired as a legal assistant at a prestigious office in the city, and the first few days were normal. The dinner conversations still flowed, the goodnight kisses still happened. But it only took a week for Logan to notice the details were starting to fragment. Her clothes became more fitted, heels replaced sneakers. The laughter on the phone turned into silence whenever he entered the room. Madison now said she was too tired to talk or watch something together. And her touch, once spontaneous, now seemed rehearsed. Logan wasn't the insecure type of man. Quite the opposite. But he was observant. And over the years, he had learned that betrayals rarely start with kisses, they start with distances. The suspicion began to turn into restlessness. Logan wasn't the type to confront without evidence. He preferred precision over emotion. Instead of yelling, he observed. Instead of accusing, he analyzed. He began to notice the schedules, the patterns, the small slips. One night, she mentioned that her boss was going through a complicated divorce and that the employees were offering support. "He's really suffering," she commented. And Logan found it strange, not because of the content, but the way she spoke about him. It was too personal, too intimate. A tone you don't use to talk about a boss, but someone who has already crossed boundaries. Days later, she appeared wearing a new necklace. She said she bought it herself during a sale. But the tag from the luxury jewelry store was still in her purse. Logan knew that model was expensive. She would have mentioned it if she had really bought it. She would have shown the receipt proudly, made a social media post. But no. It was hidden. It was a gift. And it wasn't from him. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. They still had dinner together. Still watched movies. Still slept side by side. But Logan no longer touched her with the same lightness. He was always analyzing, testing, calculating. And she, perhaps sensing this, tried to compensate with exaggerated gestures. Sent affectionate messages in the middle of the day. Bought his favorite dishes for no reason. But Logan saw through it. He didn't want gestures of guilt. He wanted the truth. And more than that, he wanted justice. That's when he decided to stop doubting his own intuition. He resolved to act. And as with everything he did, he approached it methodically. He hired a private detective. A discreet, efficient professional, specialized in marital cases. In less than 2 weeks, the detective contacted him. The moment Logan decided to step out of the observer role and take action was exactly when he received the envelope from the detective. He was sitting at the kitchen table when he opened the package. His hands trembled, but his gaze remained steady. Inside, there were dates, times, videos, and clear images. There was no way to distort what was right in front of his eyes. Madison and James Weston, the partner at the law firm where she worked, appeared side by side at an exclusive restaurant, then entering a discreet hotel together, and leaving hours later, smiling and exchanging affectionate gestures. The images spoke for themselves. Logan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach, but instead of collapsing, he mentally rose. There was no more room for assumptions. All that was left was deciding what to do with that truth. It was a strange feeling, a mix of deep pain and relentless clarity. The betrayal was no longer a shadow, it was a fact. And now he had a dilemma on his hands. He could simply walk away, cut ties, disappear. But something inside him demanded more. There was something that screamed for justice. Not cruel revenge, not spectacle. But a worthy response. To end this story with the same intelligence he applied to everything else in life. He didn't want to yell, destroy everything, or tarnish his own name with scandal. He wanted every choice Madison and James made to have consequences, not just within the marriage, but outside of it too. In that state of lucidity, Logan made a decision that required courage. He researched the name of Sarah Weston, the wife of the man Madison was cheating with. He knew little about her. Logan managed to find her profile on a social network and realized Sarah was pregnant. This stalled his decision for a few hours. He stared at that photo, where she smiled with one hand on her belly and the other holding a teacup, as if the world were at peace. He wondered if it was worth involving her. If exposing everything at that moment would be fair or simply cruel. He thought a lot about it. But the truth was, he had been hurt too. He had been deceived, manipulated, and turned into an extra in his own life. If he stayed silent, he wouldn't just continue being complicit in everything, he would also allow others to keep living a lie. The decision to tell Sarah wasn't just about personal justice. It was about preventing another human being from living blindly, unaware of what was truly happening around her. And above all, Logan needed to see with his own eyes the impact of the truth. He needed to witness the fall of that theater. That's how he arranged a meeting with Sarah Weston. He called the law firm's office number, asked to be transferred to her extension, and with a calm and steady voice, said, "My name is Logan Bennett, husband of Madison, who is an assistant to your husband. I have something important you need to see. It's about your husband." She was silent for a few seconds but agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe, far from the city center, at a time when few people would be around. Logan arrived early and sat at a table in the back. He was tense but determined. When he saw Sarah enter, he felt his stomach churn. She looked different from her social media image. More tired, more swollen, the weight of pregnancy evident. But there was dignity in every step she took. Sarah approached with a polite smile and introduced herself. Logan hesitated for a moment, assessing whether it was still the right thing to do. She was a pregnant woman, about to give birth, about to trust someone. But when he opened his mouth, the words came naturally. Without anger, without exaggeration, just truths. He handed over the envelope, explained what he had discovered, and spoke clearly and respectfully. Sarah listened to everything in silence. She opened the package, looked at the images, and her expression slowly changed. There were no tears, no screams. But her eyes grew cold, her breathing shallow, and she simply said, "Thank you for coming." After that, she stood up, shook Logan's hand, and walked away with dignity. And in that simple gesture, without harsh words, Logan knew he had done the right thing. A few days later, he heard from a mutual colleague that Sarah had kicked James out of the house. She filed for divorce, changed the name of the child she was about to have, and blocked all contact channels. And there, Logan had his first real sense of justice. That didn't erase what he had lived through. It didn't lessen the pain. But it was the first sign that, even in the face of betrayal, he could still control how the story ended. Logan realized there were two ways to end a lie, destroying it with fury or dismantling it with intelligence. He chose the latter. When he returned home after meeting with Sarah, he sat at the dining table and, for the first time in weeks, faced Madison directly. She had prepared something simple, as she always did when trying to act normally. Her face showed fatigue, but her speech was still confident, rehearsed. They began eating in silence until he, in a casual tone, broke the mood. "I met an interesting person today. Your boss's wife." Her fork stopped mid-air. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but her hands betrayed a subtle tremor. In fractions of a second, her eyes searched his for any clue about what he knew. Logan observed everything. Every micro-expression, every hesitation. He no longer needed proof. He wanted to see how far she would go trying to keep the lie alive. Madison's response was as predictable as possible. Really? What a coincidence. Where was that? He smiled lightly and answered with another question. Does she know her husband is living in two worlds? The sentence fell like a blade between them. She pretended not to understand, tried to change the subject, but Logan continued, calmly. He laid out what he knew, described dates, times, behaviors. He told her he had hired a detective and already showed everything to Sarah. Madison then dropped her utensils. Her hands rested on the table, her shoulders slumped. For a few seconds, it seemed like she would break into tears, but what came was an attempt at explanation. I got lost. It was confusing. It wasn't supposed to happen. This kind of justification was common in stories of infidelity. People act as if the mistake came out of nowhere, as if they stumbled into an invisible trap. Logan knew this speech. It's a way to shift responsibility, to try to soften the impact of the choice. But he knew no one gets lost by accident. Cheating is a decision. It involves planning, omissions, lies told with conviction. Madison hadn't gotten confused. She had allowed herself. Repeatedly. She knew where she was stepping, knew what she was hiding, knew she had crossed limits and chose to continue anyway. And worst of all, she did it while still coming home and sleeping next to him as if nothing was wrong. Even though he was overwhelmed by pain, Logan didn't let anger drive that conversation. He wanted her to understand, in no uncertain terms, what she had destroyed. He said the betrayal didn't start at the hotel with James, but much earlier, in the looks she avoided, in the curt responses, in the deleted messages, in the effort to make him feel paranoid all the time. The betrayal had seeped in like a slow leak. And she, instead of stopping it, let it spread until it reached everything. Madison listened in silence, as if each word from him were a sentence. She tried to intervene with phrases like, "It was just a phase," or "I was going to end things with him," but Logan cut her off with surgical coldness. "You weren't going to end it. You just underestimated me." This part of the story doesn't have shouting or explosive scenes. It's where the concept of dignity comes into play. Because Logan had already moved past wanting to save her or convince her. What he wanted now was for her to face the truth without masks. To feel the weight of her own actions. He knew that from that point on, any word from her would be an attempt to patch things up. And when someone tries to mend what they tore by choice, they rarely manage to restore the original fabric. Respect, for him, was like a cracked crystal. It might still stand, but it no longer reflected the same light. He ended the conversation with a dry tone, but without raising his voice. He told her that if she had confessed, maybe everything would have been different. That regret, when sincere and immediate, can sometimes pave the way for rebuilding. But when it's delayed and forced by exposure, it's nothing more than emotional survival. Madison swallowed hard. For the first time, she was at a loss for words. Logan stood up, picked up his plate, placed it in the sink, and left the kitchen. No scene, no speech, no promises. Just the certainty that, from that moment on, their marriage was merely an expired contract. A few days before that final conversation, Logan had already taken steps. Without telling anyone, he visited some properties, chose a modest apartment located in a quiet neighborhood, and signed an indefinite rental agreement. He packed only the essentials, some clothes, his documents, and the certainty that there was nothing left to salvage in that marriage. The divorce papers were already signed by him. The decision had been made even before the final confrontation because he knew that, even if Madison begged for forgiveness, some scars would never heal properly. Her infidelity wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, and, above all, planned with cold calculation while he still believed they were building something together. That night, lying on the couch, Logan couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and wondered at what exact point the woman he married had ceased to exist. Madison was crying in her room. Maybe she knew it would be their last night under the same roof. Maybe she hoped for a second chance. But she had already had plenty. The difference now was that Logan wouldn't let himself be fooled again by tears or empty promises. Early the next morning, before sunrise, he got up, took a shower, put on the same shirt he wore the day he proposed to her, and left silently. No note, no message. He just left. The new apartment was modest but comfortable. No memories scattered on the walls, no smell of betrayal lingering in the corners. It was a fresh start, from scratch. In that space, he could breathe easily. He could sleep in peace. During the first few days, he avoided talking about it with friends. He avoided fueling resentment. He wanted to understand what was left of him after everything. He focused on work, rebuilt his routine, kept his mind busy with anything that would distance him from the story he had left behind. But even in this new scenario, a part of him still observed, in silence, the conclusion of the chapter he had closed. 2 days later, upon receiving a notification from the security camera at the old house, he clicked on it. The image was clear. Madison was walking alone through the garage, her hair tied up carelessly, no makeup on her face. She looked thinner. Her steps were slow, her gaze lost. She entered the house with difficulty, as if that space no longer belonged to her. A few hours later, an old colleague sent Logan a message. With some surprise, he said that Madison had been fired. Officially, the reason was professional incompatibility, but he knew it was more than that. James Weston, the man she risked her marriage for, had quickly severed ties, like someone burning a bridge to avoid burning alongside it. Madison had become a liability for his image, and as happens to those who enter unbalanced power dynamics, she was dismissed without ceremony, like an inconvenient burden. That hit Logan in an unexpected way. Not with satisfaction, but with confirmation. Life, sometimes, has its own way of aligning the pieces. While she dealt with the consequences of her actions, he was already moving at a different pace. He was starting to regain control of his own narrative. He knew this moment would come. All it took was stepping out of the picture and letting the truth take its course. Madison tried to hide, manipulated, lied, but reality is relentless when it arrives. And it arrived for her like a door closing without warning, pushing her into a world where no one would cover her mistakes anymore. 6 months after the separation, while doing quick shopping at a grocery store near the office, Logan spotted a familiar figure at the checkout. It was Madison. She was wearing a uniform, with the store's name embroidered on her shirt. Her hair was tied up carelessly, her face drawn, but without the air of someone still hoping to reverse the past. She was thinner, paler, but also more contained, like someone who had learned to stay quiet in the face of life. She looked at him for a few seconds. She didn't try to approach, nor did she look away. She just maintained eye contact long enough to silently acknowledge the point where everything had fallen apart. Logan didn't feel anger. There was no space for that anymore. What he felt was a rare kind of peace. The certainty that moving forward was the most correct and courageous act he could have taken. Not out of pride, but out of self-preservation. Because sometimes, loving someone means accepting that the other person chose a path where you no longer fit. And allowing the fall to happen without trying to stop it is part of that process. He learned that justice doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes, it comes with silence and consequence. And when it arrives that way, no one needs to point fingers, the mistakes themselves do the work. As he pushed the cart through the aisles of the market, Logan thought about how life had led everything to this point. A betrayal, a rupture, and then a rebirth. But what impressed him most was realizing how everything could have been different with just one less choice, one truth spoken before the lie grew. Madison had lost her job, her house, her husband, and now seemed to be surviving in a world she herself had created. Logan, on the other hand, had reclaimed his own identity. And that was the most elegant revenge, moving forward while the other sinks under their own steps. Without needing to retaliate with shouts, without needing to ruin anyone. Just letting every action collect its exact price. Because, in the end, what destroys a person isn't the punishment from someone else, it's the reflection of the choices they themselves planted. And with that, Logan closed that chapter not with slamming doors, but with the tranquility of someone with a clean conscience and a clear path ahead. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.